Picture a dining table dressed in white linen so long that the far end of it has its own weather. Now load it with 12 courses, served in French, eaten in silence. Add a man at the head of that table who will eat every one of those courses quickly, seriously, with total attention, the way other men read urgent telegrams. Add the fact that this is his 4th meal of the day, and there is one more still to come, close to midnight, and that it will probably involve grilled oysters. Add the fact that he is 65 years old, that his tailor's books record a waist of 48 inches, and that he is the King of England, Emperor of India, ruler of a quarter of the earth. That's the table you're going to stand beside tonight. Not sit at, stand beside. Because the people who knew exactly how much King Edward VII ate were not his ministers and not his biographers. They were the men in scarlet livery standing 3 feet behind his chair, holding the dishes, watching his plate, forbidden to speak, forbidden to sit, forbidden, above all, to be noticed. The footmen, the men who carried the pheasant in and carried the bones out. The men who knew, to the snipe, to the oyster, to the cigar, what the appetite of a king actually looked like from close range. We're going back there tonight, not to the kitchens. The kitchens are their own kingdom and their own story. Tonight we stay upstairs, in the dining rooms themselves, on the polished side of the service door. 1 year, 1 man, 1 king's table. Everything a royal footman would have seen, smelled, carried, and survived. From the breakfast sideboard at 8 in the morning to the oyster supper at midnight. One thing before we go in, because I want to be honest with you, the way I always try to be. The menus in this story are real. They survive, written out in French on cards, dated. The clocks set half an hour fast are real. The waist measurement is real. It is in the tailoring records. The 12 cigars and 20 cigarettes a day are real. His doctors counted them with despair. The nickname is real, and so is what happened to the one man foolish enough to say it to the king's face. The great banquet you will stand through near the end of this story is real, down to the date. But the eyes I am lending you tonight belong to no single man. They are stitched together from the footmen and pages and table deckers who really stood in those rooms, most of whom were never allowed to leave their names on anything except a wage book. The rooms are real, the food is real, the king is real. The eyes are borrowed. Where something is legend rather than record, I will tell you which is which. So, I make these long history stories, and I honestly still can't tell you whether anyone truly sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who want to know exactly how many courses a king could put away between a day's shooting and a game of bridge. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. Here we go. The pheasant is heavier than it looks. That's the first thing nobody tells you about this work. Not the etiquette, not the silence, not the king, the weight. A cold roast pheasant, glazed and dressed and laid on a silver dish that was old when your grandfather was born, comes to something like a stone's worth of bird and metal together, and you are carrying it at shoulder height, level, steady, across 40 feet of carpet, at 8 o'clock in the morning, on the balls of your feet so your heels don't thump. Except it isn't 8 o'clock in the morning. Not really. Every clock in this house is lying to you, and it is lying on purpose, and you will get to that in a moment. You set the dish down on the breakfast sideboard, between the cold partridge and the raised pie, and you square it to the edge of the cloth without being told, because Mr. Vane has eyes in the back of his skull and a memory like a ledger. The dish must sit square. The handles of the serving pieces must all point the same way, like soldiers. The cloth must hang even. You have done this every morning for months, and your hands do it now without you, which is dangerous, because the morning your hands stop paying attention is the morning something falls, and then it reaches you. The smell. Not one smell. Layers of them. The way this house always smells in the early morning. The cold game first. Pheasant and partridge under their glaze. A smell like larder and gunroom and autumn all at once. Then the coffee coming up strong from the urns, and the chafing dishes behind you breathing out bacon and haddock and kidneys into the cold air of the room. Under that, beeswax and turpentine from the floor polish, and wood smoke from a fire that was lit 2 hours ago by a housemaid you will never see, because her work, like yours, is supposed to have happened by magic. And threaded through all of it, faint but unmistakable, drifting in from somewhere beyond the door at the far end, cigar smoke. The king is awake, they say upstairs, and you have no way to check it. You only know what the valets say at supper, that His Majesty is handed his first smoke before he has properly finished dressing. The doctors, the valets swear, have counted his day for him. 20 cigarettes, 12 cigars, sunrise to midnight. The first of those 12 is burning somewhere over your head right now, and its smoke has found its way down through the corridors ahead of the man himself, the way a herald walks ahead of a procession. That is how you always know. Not a bell, not a voice. Smoke. When you smell the first cigar, you have perhaps 20 minutes. Welcome to Sandringham House, Norfolk, in the 3rd week of October, 1907. Your name is Thomas Croft. You are 23 years old, and you were born 8 miles from where you're standing, in a village where your father still lifts sugar beet out of wet clay for a shilling or 2 a day. You are a 3rd footman in the household of His Majesty King Edward VII, which means you wear his scarlet, carry his dishes, stand behind his guests, and earn a little under £30 a year. All found, boarded, fed and liveried at the king's expense. Back home, when you got the place, your mother cried, and your father said only that at least one Croft would find out what pheasant tasted like. He was wrong, as it happens. You've carried more pheasants than you could count by now. You've never eaten one. Everything they would have seen, I said, and smelled and survived. Here is the first thing you had to survive, and it is not what you'd guess. It is not the king. It is the standing. You will stand today, in total, for something like 10 hours. You will stand through breakfast, through the laying of luncheon, through the serving of it, through tea, through a dinner of a dozen courses, and through whatever comes after dinner, and through all of that time the single most important part of your work will be to look as if you are not there at all. A footman who's noticed has failed. Your 2 yards of scarlet cloth and gilt buttons built around a pair of aching feet, and the whole art of your profession is to be furniture. Furniture that breathes, furniture that watches, because you do watch. That is the part nobody outside the service door ever understands. You're forbidden to speak, forbidden to smile, forbidden to meet an eye, and so all that is left to you is watching, and a royal footman becomes, without meaning to, one of the best informed men in England. You know who ate nothing and who ate everything. You know which duchess slipped her quail to the dog under the table. You know what the king leaves on his plate. Nothing. He leaves nothing on his plate. We'll get to that. First, the clocks. Because you promised yourself you'd explain the clocks, and because there is no better door into this house than its lying clocks. Every clock at Sandringham, the tall case clock in the hall, the little gilt carriage clocks in the drawing rooms, the clock in the stable tower that the whole estate sets its day by. Every one of them is kept exactly half an hour fast. This is real. It even has a name. People call it Sandringham time. The king ordered it years ago, and the polite explanation is that it steals an extra half hour of winter daylight for the shooting. And the impolite explanation, the one the older servants give with a perfectly straight face, is that a household that is half an hour ahead of the truth has a fighting chance of getting Queen Alexandra anywhere by the time she is wanted. The Queen is famous for many things. Her beauty, which is real even now, and her kindness, which you have seen with your own eyes. But punctuality has never been among them, and her husband is the most punctual man alive. So the whole estate lives 30 minutes into the future by royal command. When the stable clock says 8, God's own time says 7:30. You wake by a lie, you serve breakfast by a lie, and after a while the lie becomes the only truth that matters, because it is the king's. So it is 8 o'clock, Sandringham time, on an October morning in 1907, and the smoke of the first of 12 cigars is drifting down the corridor, and the pheasant is square on the cloth, and somewhere above you the heaviest, hungriest, most closely watched man in the British Empire is coming down to breakfast, and you had better tell them in the kitchen passage, because the king does not like to be kept waiting for his food. The books all agree on that, and so does every man in this house. He can forgive a great deal, His Majesty. Lateness at his table is not on the list. Rewind 2 hours so you can see how a morning like this is built. Your day began in the dark, in an attic room under the slates that you share with another footman, a Londoner named Alfred Dowd. Alf to everyone below stairs, that boy to Mr. Vane, who sleeps like a man being paid for it and wakes like a man being robbed. The room is cold enough in October that the water in the jug has a skin of chill on it. There isn't ice yet, but is thinking about it. You wash standing on a strip of drugget so your feet don't freeze to the boards. You shave by candle, carefully, because a footman with a cut on his chin is a footman Mr. Vane will look at twice, and nobody wants to be looked at twice. Then the livery. Understand something about the livery, because it is not clothing, it is architecture. For ordinary mornings it is the undress livery. Dark coat, scarlet waistcoat, and the small buttons with the royal cipher that you polish yourself with a button stick so the polish never touches the cloth. For full state occasions there is another livery altogether, scarlet and gold, heavy as a saddle, waiting for you in a canvas bag in the wardrobe room, and with it a box of powder for your hair, because on the greatest nights of all, a royal footman still powders his head white, like something out of his grandfather's century. You've been fitted for that state livery. You've never yet worn it. It hangs there in its bag like a promise or a threat, and every time you pass the wardrobe room you're aware of it, the way you'd be aware of a loaded gun on a wall. Remember that. The scarlet and gold in the bag, and the powder box with your name chalked on the lid. They will come down off their shelf before this story is over. By 6, real 6, lying 6:30 on every clock, you're downstairs, and the house is already at work around you like a ship before the passengers wake. And when I say at work, I need you to understand what that means in a royal household in 1907. This is not a rich man's house with a cook and a couple of maids. Sandringham in a shooting week runs on more than 100 servants, indoor and out, and the whole vast machine has one single product. Comfort. Invisible, seamless, silent comfort. Delivered 5 times a day in the shape of food. 5 times. Let me say that slowly, because this is the figure everything else in this story hangs on, and it is not gossip. It is the settled record of the people who fed him. Breakfast, luncheon, tea, dinner, supper. His Majesty, King Edward VII, eats 5 meals a day, and several of them run to many courses, and the people who serve him have done the arithmetic in the servants' hall more than once, because you cannot stand behind that chair every day and not do it. 12 courses at dinner alone most nights. His biographers, writing later with the menus in front of them, will use words like prodigious, and the doctors will use words you're not supposed to hear, but below stairs nobody uses any word at all. Below stairs it is simply the weather of the house. The king eats. That is the sun the household orbits. Mr. Vane is in the pantry when you come down, and Mr. Vane is the man you must meet properly, because for this year of your life he is the nearest thing you have to a father, a sergeant major, and a conscience, all in one black coat. He is somewhere past 50, dry as a communion wafer, first footman by rank, but in truth the working brain of the dining rooms, and he has served this family since the present king was a Prince of Wales with a smaller waist and a worse reputation. He has a long grey face that has never once been surprised in your hearing, and hands that can lay a cloth for 60 without a wrinkle. And in the breast pocket of his coat he keeps a small black notebook with a rubber band around it. And that notebook is the true service manual of the king's table, because it holds 20 years of one man's observations. What his Majesty likes, what he will not forgive, which guests are slow eaters, which sauces come back untouched, what was served the last time a given prince dined and must not be served to him again. No one has read it. No one would dare ask. When question of the table cannot be settled any other way, Mr. Vane takes out the book, wets his thumb, finds the page, and settles it. Croft, he says, without looking up from the salver he's inspecting. The breakfast room, cold sideboard first, and Croft. And now he does look up, and this is the sentence you will hear from him 100 times this year. The sentence that is the beginning of all wisdom in this profession. When His Majesty is at table, you watch the plate, not the man, never the man, the plate. You know the rule. Everyone in Scarlet knows the rule. But it is worth spelling out here, in the quiet before breakfast, because at the far end of this story, on the biggest night this house's people will ever work, you're going to see the rule operate like a guillotine, and I want you to know it when you see it. The rule is this. At the king's table, the king's plate commands every other plate in the room. When His Majesty finishes a course, that course is finished. The service moves, the footmen clear. It does not matter whether the ambassador on his left is halfway through his fish, or has not yet lifted his fork. The fish is over, because the king's fish is over. That is etiquette old as monarchy, and under most sovereigns it is a formality, because most sovereigns dawdle. Under this king it is a live and daily hazard, because this king, who loves food more than any man in Europe, eats faster than any man you have ever watched. He does not talk his way down a menu. He addresses it, course after course, quickly, neatly, completely, with a concentration that his ministers wish he would bring to their boxes, and every plate in the room lives and dies by his pace. His biographers will write without exaggeration that a dinner of 12 courses could pass under his hands in well under the hour. You have timed it yourself against the lying clocks standing at the sideboard. They are not wrong, so watch the plate. When the king's knife and fork come together, you move, and heaven help the guest who was saving his best mouthful for last. Yes, Mr. Vane, you say. And wake that boy, he adds, meaning Alf. who is technically awake and technically present, and is at this moment leaning against the plate-room doorway with his eyes shut, upright like a horse. The breakfast you then lay is, by this king's standards, the small meal of the day, and it would feed your father's entire village. Understand the shape of it. This is not a plated breakfast, it is a landscape. On the hot side, silver chafing dishes over spirit lamps, bacon, eggs, grilled haddock, devilled kidneys, sometimes woodcock or snipe when the guns have been generous. On the cold sideboard, where you have just set your pheasant, the cold game, the raised pies, a ham, coffee and rolls and toast in racks. The guests come down when they please and graze where they like, country house fashion. The king, when he's at Sandringham in a shooting week, does his real morning eating with a seriousness the guests only play at, though the valets will tell you, and the memoirs will back them, that on ordinary quiet mornings in London he can be almost restrained before noon. A boiled egg, a little fish, coffee. Restraint being a relative science in this reign. Nobody is fooled, least of all his doctors. Whatever is spared at breakfast will be collected with interest before midnight. At 10 minutes past 8 Sandringham time you hear him. You hear him before you see him, always. It is partly the voice, deep, warm, gravelled by 40 years of cigars, a voice with German ancestry and Parisian Polish, rolling some pleasantry down the corridor at a guest, and partly the small commotion that travels with him like bow-water, doors and dogs and equerries. Then the smell of the cigar arrives in earnest, and then the King of England is in the breakfast-room, and you are looking at the middle distance with your spine straight and your face closed, and seeing him anyway, the way you've learned to see everything without looking at it. He is not tall, 5'7" or so in his boots, and he is, there is no honest way around the word, that half of Europe whispers and no one says aloud, fat. The tailor's measurements, which are records and not gossip, put his waist at 48 inches. But here is what the caricatures never get, and what strikes you every single morning. He carries it like a man of war. The beautiful clothes cut in Savile Row and copied on 2 continents. The beard trimmed to a point. The cigar held just so. The small blue eyes that miss nothing. Nothing in any room he enters. Kings are looked at all their lives, and this one long ago made looking at into a weapon that points both ways. He inspects a room the way Mr. Vane inspects a table. You have seen him notice, in one slow pass of those eyes, a guest's unfortunate waistcoat, a wilted flower, and a new face among the footmen. The new face, 3 weeks ago, was yours. What happened then you will tell later when you can do it justice. For now, breakfast. He takes his place. Caesar, a small, rough-haired, entirely unrepentant white fox terrier, who goes where he pleases in this house and answers to no man but one, and whose collar carries in engraved letters the only introduction he will ever need. I am Caesar. I belong to the king. Arranges himself under the chair with the gravity of a bishop, and the plate begins. Now, while the chafing dishes do their work and the room fills with guests in tweed, let me show you the country you actually live in, because your country is not Norfolk. Your country is roughly 60 feet long, and it is called the dining room, and like all countries it has provinces, borders, and laws. The border is the service door, baize-lined, silent on its hinges and absolute. On the far side of it, noise, heat, shirt sleeves, the clatter of the pantries and the long corridor down which everything you serve arrives from a kitchen you rarely see, and are not tonight going to visit. On this side, candlelight, flowers, silver, and hush. You cross that border 200 times a day, and each crossing is a small transformation. On the kitchen side you may hurry, on this side you may not, ever, no matter what is burning, spilling, or collapsing. A footman walks, a footman glides. If the house caught fire, Mr. Vane would expect you to announce it at a glide. The provinces of your country are the sideboards. The cold sideboard, the hot table with its spirit lamps, the wine table under the eye of the butler's men, and the great carved sideboard where the showplate stands. Silver and silver gilt, dressed up the tears like a frozen fountain, worth more than the parish you were born in. You know its weight piece by piece because you carry it, in and out, morning and night, and it is counted, every piece, every time, in a pantry book. Remember the counting. Counting is going to matter later, at 2 o'clock in the morning on the biggest night of this story. And on the chimney-piece end of the room, in a little silver stand, stands the law of the land, the menu. Here is a thing almost nobody outside these rooms knows. Every meal the king eats is written out beforehand in French, in a fine copper-plate hand, on a card headed with the royal cipher. The dishes listed in order of service like a battle plan. A copy stands on the table. The kitchen keeps its own. The household files what must be filed, and the cards that are done with, the spares and the smudged ones and the ones the guests don't pocket as souvenirs, those get swept away with the dead flowers, and nobody on earth cares what becomes of them. You care. This is your one small secret, and since it is only you and me in the dark, I'll tell it. In your box upstairs under your Sunday shirt you keep a growing stack of them, rescued from the waste over the months. Creased, wine-ringed, some of them, but each one dated, each one a day of a king's appetite in fine French copper plate. You cannot say exactly why you save them, partly because they are the most beautiful things you've ever been allowed to touch, partly because you have an idea, not yet in words, that someday, when all this is over, nobody will believe you. Consommé, turbot, snipe, ortolans, quails, a dozen lines to a card, 5 cards to a day. Your father lifts sugar beet. You collect the appetites of kings. Keep the box in mind. It fills all year, and at the end of this story you'll put one particular card into it, and that card is the reason we are here. Breakfast this morning runs long, because a shooting morning breakfast always does. The guns, that is what you call the gentlemen who will shoot today. The guns, as if the men and their weapons were one creature, eat like men going to war, which in their minds they are. And at the head of it the king works through his plate with that quick, absorbed, total attention you have never seen in any other eater. And this is the place to make you feel it properly, because everything else in this story stands on it. Watch him, sideways from the sideboard, the only way you are allowed. Most people at a table like this are doing 6 things: talking, laughing, flirting, listening, performing, and incidentally eating. The king, when the plate is in front of him, is doing one thing. The conversation waits, or rather it arranges itself around him, the way traffic arranges itself around a state coach. The fork moves without hurry and without pause. There is no picking, no pushing food about, none of that pretense of indifference that fashionable people learn. He is 65 years old. He has eaten at the greatest tables of Europe for half a century, and he sits down to devilled kidneys with the undimmed seriousness of a hungry boy. The valets say, and the memoir writers will say it after them, so you are in good company, that food is one of the very few things in this world that has never once bored him. And when the knife and fork come together, that is the whole room's signal, and the plates lift like a flock of birds. By 9:30 the guns are gone, out to the beats and the coverts with the beaters and the loaders, and the dining room exhales, and your real morning begins. The stripping and relaying of your entire country, top to bottom for luncheon. Cloth off, cloth on, plate out, plate in. Glasses in ranks, 4 to a place. Flowers up from the glass houses. It takes 3 of you 2.5 hours to do it to Mr. Vane's standard, and Mr. Vane's standard is a spirit level and a measuring eye. Knives a thumb's width from the table edge, chairs a hand's width from the cloth, every candle wick pinched to the same height. Symmetry, Croft, he says, moving down the far side of the table like a grey heron, straightening what you have already straightened. A king's table is the one place in England where everything is exactly where it ought to be. They pay us to build the only tidy country in the world, and we build it 3 times a day. He pauses at the head of the table, checks the distance of the king's chair with his knuckles, and adds, in exactly the same voice, "Your 3rd glass is crooked. Fix it." That is Mr. Vane making a joke and issuing a correction in one breath. You will learn to tell the difference by springtime. And here is where this story parts company with what you probably imagine, because you are picturing the king's luncheon as something modest between the morning's slaughter and the evening's feast. Understand what a shooting luncheon means in this reign. It means that at midday the entire apparatus of the royal table, hot food, cold food, wine, linen, silver and yew, is packed, carted and rebuilt inside a luncheon hut or a marquee at the edge of a Norfolk covert, so that a dozen gentlemen with cold hands can sit down in the middle of a muddy field to a hot luncheon of several courses that would not disgrace a London club. The pony carts go out loaded like a small regiment's baggage train. There is soup that has travelled in padded cans and is still steaming when you ladle it. There are hot entrees under covers. There is cold game from yesterday's shooting, which has a certain circularity to it if you let yourself think, which you don't, because you are carrying a hot water dish with both hands across frozen ruts in buckled shoes. The king shoots less than he did, the older servants say. He was never the finest shot of his set, and the waste is not an ally in a turnip field, but no man in England attends a shooting luncheon with more conviction. Out there in the marquee, with the paraffin stoves roaring and the smell of mud and gun oil and soup all mixed together, and Caesar patrolling under the trestles on the firm, understanding that gentlemen who shoot are gentlemen who drop things, His Majesty sits on a folding chair that you privately fear for, and eats his way down the travelling menu with exactly the same order and speed and attention as if the field were a palace. It is, you realise, watching the fork rise and fall while your breath smokes and your feet die quietly inside your shoes, the most consistent thing about him. Palaces are movable. The appetite is fixed. Alf, next to you, holding the game pie at the correct angle with a face full of ancestral London patience, says without moving his lips, 5 hours to dinner. He's not being funny, he's navigating. Below stairs you do not measure the day in hours. You measure it in meals, the king's meals, the 5 fixed stars of your sky. Breakfast is behind you. Luncheon is now. Tea, dinner and supper are ahead, each with its own laying and clearing and carrying, and between them all the polishing and fetching that fills the cracks. When Alf says 5 hours to dinner, he means, brace yourself, the big one is coming. Because everything you have seen so far, the loaded sideboard, the travelling soup, the fork that never pauses, all of it is only rehearsal. The King's Day, like this story, is built the way a wave is built. It gathers all day. It breaks at dinner. But before dinner comes tea, and before tea, I owe you the story of your first day, because it explains something about this king that the caricatures in the foreign papers never print. And this channel tries to be fair even to emperors. 3 weeks ago, on your first afternoon in scarlet, you were posted at the door of the saloon during tea. Posted, meaning stood, meaning planted like a hat stand, when the king came through with 2 equerries, talking, trailing smoke, moving at that unhurried pace that everything in every house arranges itself around. And he stopped, in front of you, and the small blue eyes went over you once, the way they go over everything once, and he said, to the air rather than to anyone, "New." The senior equerry murmured your name and county, and the King of England looked at you, a beat farmer's son with his heels together and his heart going like a rabbit, and said, "Croft, a Norfolk man in Norfolk, very sensible arrangement," and went on his way, and the smoke went with him. 4 days later, passing you in the corridor before dinner, without stopping, without looking, he said, "Evening, Croft." He had kept your name. Understand, this is a man who has brought lists of guests, of horses, of battleships, a man with an empire of names to hold, and he had kept the name of a 3rd footman he had seen once. And every servant in this house has a story like yours. He knows the old coachman's rheumatism and asks after it. He knows which page's mother was ill last winter. When he tips, and he tips, personally in gold, at Christmas and at partings, he does not hand it through an equerry. He puts the sovereign in your hand and gets your name right while he does it. The same household voices that'll tell you honestly exactly how much he eats. Tell this with the same honesty. He is kind to the people who serve him, kinder by a distance than most of the gentlemen who dine at his table. You may hold both facts at once. This story is going to ask you to hold both facts all night. Tea, then. 5 o'clock Sandringham time in the saloon, and tea at Sandringham is the Queen's meal the way dinner is the King's. Queen Alexandra presides over the teacups in that soft-lit, over-furnished, photograph-crowded room. She is 62 and moves like a girl, and a deafness which is real and worsening has given her a way of holding her head, attentive, bird-like, that the whole of fashionable England once copied without knowing why. Around her, scones, muffins in hot dishes, and cakes, plural, always plural, iced and fruited and layered, and the king, who 4 hours ago finished a shooting luncheon of several courses in a marquee, takes tea. Not a cup of tea. Tea. The poached egg, perhaps. The buttered toast in quantity. A slice. And then in due course the second slice, of whichever cake stands nearest, eaten with the same quick, entire attention, while Caesar sits at his boot with the fixed expression of a dog who has done the arithmetic on gravity and crumbs and likes the odds. And it is here, at tea, in the Queen's warm room with the rain starting against the windows, that you can best see the marriage, if you watch sideways, which is the only way you're allowed to watch anything. She calls him, you have heard it, by small names left over from 40 years of a difficult, durable partnership. She reaches over once and flicks a crumb from his beard with one finger, an operation requiring the confidence of a lion tamer, and he permits it with the heavy, pleased dignity of a man who has been well fed. What she thinks of the 5 meals, of the waist the tailors keep remeasuring, of the doctors' faces, she has watched all of it for 4 decades, and the household's settled opinion below stairs where all reputations are audited nightly, is that Her Majesty long ago chose patience and has kept the choice. There are wives in England who would have gone to war over the 12th cigar. The Queen sets the ashtray nearer. Now, 8:30, dinner. Come and stand at your sideboard, and let me finally show you the thing itself, the thing the whole day has been climbing toward, the thing the title of this story promised you. The company assembles in the drawing-room, the ladies bare-shouldered, the men in white ties, and at the half-hour precisely, you could set the lying clocks by him, the king gives his arm to the ranking lady, and the procession comes in to dinner. 22 covers tonight, which for Sandringham in a shooting week is intimate. The room is all candlelight and gardenias. The showplate blazes on the great sideboard. The menu stands in its silver frame, and on it, in copperplate French, is written the evening's campaign. And I am going to read it to you course by course because these cards survive, and because you cannot understand this king through adjectives, only through the list. Consommé first, clear and dark amber, a soup that took the far side of the baize door 2 days to make and takes His Majesty 90 seconds to finish. Then fish, turbot tonight, with a sauce the colour of ivory, sole another night. In London, when the season allows, whitebait, devilled by the plateful. Then an entree, and here the card begins to speak the king's own dialect, because the entrees of this reign are where his favourites live. Côtelette de bécassine à la Suvaroff, and I will translate because the French is doing a great deal of discreet work. Snipe, a marsh bird smaller than your fist, boned, and its little body filled with foie gras and forcemeat, pressed into a cutlet, cooked, crowned with truffle. A bird stuffed with the fattened liver of another bird. That dish is documented on his menus. It is remembered by name in the memoirs of his kitchens, and it is on the card tonight, and you will carry the silver dish of them down the table, and hold it steady at each white shoulder, while the little cutlets go 2 by 2 onto the plates. Then the relevé, the big joint. Saddle of mutton, perhaps, or a haunch of the estate's own venison. And after it, when the pace of a lesser table would be slackening toward fruit, this table simply changes weapons. The roast course, game. It is October, so the game is at the flood. Pheasant, partridge, and up from the moors grouse and ptarmigan, and when the great dishes of them come in dressed and piled on their croutes, tail feathers set back into the birds like banners, the old hands call the arrangement by its below-stairs name, the pyramid, because that is what it is. Game birds built up in tiers, architecture in roast flesh, carried shoulder high down a candlelit room. Then, in their season, and when the couriers from the continent have done their work, the little birds, quail stuffed, again with foie gras, and on the rarest cards a dish I will report and not defend, because this channel tells you which is which, and this one is documented and was never, even then, entirely respectable. Ortolans, a songbird the size of your thumb, fattened in the dark, cooked and eaten whole, bones and all, in 2 bites. And the French, it is said, eat them with the napkin drawn up over the head, to keep in the scent, or, as the old joke runs, to hide from God. Whether any napkin ever went up at this table the record does not say, and so neither will I. That the little birds went down it, the cards say plainly, and still the list is not finished. An entremet, asparagus forced under glass in October, or a soufflé standing up out of its dish like a soft tower. A sweet, the pastry cook's filigree work, spun sugar and cream. A savoury, because an Englishman ends on salt. A devilled sardine, a mushroom on toast, then the ices, then dessert proper, the fruit of the royal glass houses, peaches in October, muscat grapes cut with silver scissors. 12 courses more or less, night after night. And here is the fact that turns the whole gorgeous list from spectacle into something stranger. He eats it, all of it. This is the testimony of every table he ever sat at. Guests pick and choose down a card like this. The king does not skip. Course to course, quickly, completely, seriously, while the wax burns down. And mind you, and the memoirs are clear on this too, he is no great drinker. A little champagne with dinner, a brandy after. The caricature of the sodden glutton is wrong by half. Wine bores him. Food, never. And at 9 or a little past, under the hour, always under the hour, 12 courses and out, the king's knife and fork come together for the last time, and 21 other places finish whether they have finished or not, and the ladies rise, and the men sit a quarter hour over coffee and cigars, and the 7th or 8th cigar of the day is lit, and your legs have been dead from the knee down since the entree, and the first full day I am giving you is, by the standards of this house, over. Except that nothing in this house is over until the 5th meal. But the 5th meal belongs to the night, and the night deserves its own beginning. The night at Sandringham has a shape, and the shape is a card table. After dinner the household reforms in the drawing-room and the king plays bridge. This is not an occasional amusement. It is the standing order of the evening, as fixed as the clocks, and the whole late architecture of the house is built around it. The tables are set out, the markers and the cards laid just so, the candles trimmed. The Queen and her ladies settle to their own talk and their needlework and their photograph albums at the soft end of the room, and the king sits down to his rubber with the seriousness he brings to everything he actually enjoys, which is to say the seriousness other men reserve for religion. He plays well, the equerries say, and hates to play badly, and hates worse a partner who plays badly. And there are men in London clubs who dine out for years on the memory of the evening they trumped His Majesty's trick. The cigar burns at his elbow. The smoke climbs into the lamplight. From your post by the door, where you stand with the tray and the glasses, the room looks like the inside of a jewel box and sounds hour after hour of almost nothing. The flick of cards, the fire, the rain on the glass, one word of bidding at a time. And then, toward midnight, the 5th meal. They call it supper, and on paper it is a trifle. And I want you to stand where you are standing at the door of a warm room at midnight and consider what actually arrives. Grilled oysters. This is the documented one, the famous one, remembered by the people who fed him. His Majesty is fond of finishing the day, after the 4th meal, after the 12 courses, with oysters done hot and a little cold chicken standing by, and sandwiches for the card tables, and whatever else the still-lit end of the kitchen wing has been holding ready on the chance. The chafing dish comes up the corridor with its little blue flame, and the smell of the sea arrives absurdly in the middle of Norfolk at midnight. Hot shells and butter, and the king, still holding his cards, eats oysters at the card table at an hour when his doctors devoutly believe him to be asleep, and, watching the plate sideways from your post, you find yourself doing the day's full arithmetic at last. Breakfast. A shooting luncheon of several courses in a field. Tea with the 2nd slice. 12 courses at dinner, snipe stuffed with foie gras among them, and now oysters after midnight for pleasure at cards. 5 meals, 1 day, every day. You've now seen one full revolution of the machine you serve, and tomorrow the machine will do it again, and the day after, and the fact that a single human frame sustains this at 65 under the eyes of frightened physicians is, whatever else it is, a fact. The people who served him did not moralize about it. Neither will we. In this house it is simply the sun, and the sun rose 5 times a day. It is 1:30 before the drawing-room empties, and past 2 before your own day truly ends. Down in the servants' hall over cocoa and the heel of a loaf, in that last unbuttoned hour when the house belongs to the people who carry it. And this is where you hear the stories, because the servants' hall is the true archive of any great house. And the story you hear tonight, Alf begged for it. A new page had never heard it, and old Mr. Vane himself, mellowed by cocoa, consented to tell it properly. Is the story of the nickname. I said the nickname was real, and it is. Behind his back, well behind it, the smart world has for 30 years called the King Tum Tum. You can work out the etymology yourself. The tailor's 48 inches are the etymology, and the story which Vane had from men who were in service at the time, and which the memoir writers of that generation tell as household legend from the days when the king was still Prince of Wales, goes like this. A gentleman of his own set, a baronet, a friend of years, sat late one night at Sandringham, in this very house, deep enough in the brandy to feel immortal, and the prince, surveying him, said kindly enough something to the effect of, Freddie, you're very drunk. And the baronet, pointing at the princely waistcoat in front of the room, answered in the one coin that could never be forgiven, Tum Tum, you're very fat. Vane pauses here every time and lets the fire crackle. He was gone, the story finishes, before breakfast. Bags packed by servants exactly like you, carriage at the door in the dark, and the friendship of decades shut like a door. The prince who forgave gambling scandals and worse, who was godfather to half his set's children, never truly had him back. And the lesson Mr. Vane draws, looking round the cocoa cups at his footmen with those unsurprised grey eyes, is not the lesson you expect. Any fool can hold his tongue sober, he says. You hold yours always. In this work you will see everything and know everything, and the whole of your value, gentlemen, the entire price of you is that you will say nothing. The king can hear the truth from his doctors. He pays us so that he never has to hear it from the furniture. You go up the attic stairs at 2:30 with your feet throbbing, and that sentence following you all the way to the cold room under the slates. The truth from the furniture. In your box, under your Sunday shirt, the day's menu card goes onto the stack. Consommé, turbot, côtelette de bécassine à la Suvaroff, and the rest of the campaign in fine copper plate. And Alf is already snoring by the time you blow the candle out, and the last thing you think, sliding down into sleep with the rain in the slates, is that no one at home will ever believe a word of it. The days that follow settle into the deep rhythm of a Sandringham autumn, and I will let them run quickly, because a rhythm is best felt at speed. Shooting mornings, the pony carts loaded, luncheon steaming in a frozen field, tea under the Queen's lamps, the 12 courses, the cards, the oysters, the cocoa, the stairs, the game book fills. This estate in these years shoots on a scale the record keepers themselves found hard to believe. Thousands of head in a great week, and the larders hang full, and the pyramids come to table night after night. Twice more you hear the king say your name. Once at a shooting lunch croft is there mustard, and once, extraordinarily to a guest, indicating you, a Norfolk man this one. And both times the sovereign's attention passes over you like the warmth of an opened stove door, brief and enormous. And once, in that stretch of weeks, the machine nearly takes Alf's hand off. It is a Tuesday, late, after a dinner of 26. The clearing is done and the pantry is loud, and Alf, quick, hungry, 20 years old, 4 hours sleep, does the thing that every footman has thought about and no footman may do. On a dish coming down from the dining room ride 3 untouched quail, foie gras and all, bound for the larder and then heaven knows where, and Alf, in one London boy motion older than the monarchy, palms one. He is unlucky. The steward's room boy sees it, and the steward's room boy owes Alf a grudge over cards, and by morning it is with Mr. Vane, and the word for what happens next is not sacking, not yet, but it is a door with sacking on the other side of it. Theft of the king's food. Men have gone from palace service to the street for less, without characters, which in your world means without a future. Alf stands in the pantry corridor at attention with his face the colour of the whitewash, and you stand next to him, because you came up together and you cannot make your feet take you elsewhere. And Mr. Vane looks at the two of you for a long time. Then he takes out the black notebook, wets his thumb, turns it to no page in particular, and studies whatever is or is not written there. His Majesty, he says at last, does not count his quail. I do. My count last night was in error. There were 2 birds on that dish. He closes the book and the rubber band cracks like a small pistol. There will never, he says, be an error in my count again. Will there, Dowd? No, Mr. Vane, says Alf, in a voice like a boy at confirmation. There never is. And that is how you learn that the driest man in England has, buried somewhere under the black coat, a working heart, and that he will spend it once, exactly once, per career. Alf walks a chalk line from that morning on. He polishes like a penitent. And between the two of you, unspoken, the debt sits where such debts always sit in service, forever. Then, in the first days of November, the rhythm breaks. It breaks with a letter, with a whole pouch of letters and telegraph forms and lists and the sudden multiplication of secretaries in the corridors, and with Mr. Vane assembling his footman in the pantry, notebook already open, one thumb holding a page that has plainly been prepared for some time, and delivering the news in the flattest voice you have ever heard a man use on purpose, because dryness is how Mr. Vane handles powder magazines. The German Emperor is coming to England, the Kaiser, the King's own nephew, and the most complicated guest in the world, with the Empress beside him, in state, to Windsor Castle, in the 2nd week of November. And the court is going down to meet him, and the household goes ahead of the court, and the household means you. State dress, says Mr. Vane, and around you the pantry goes very quiet. Full livery, powder. His thumb moves down the page, and the grand service is coming up from the vaults. Somewhere behind you, one of the older men lets out a slow breath, the kind of breath a sailor gives when the glass starts falling. You have never worked a state banquet. You're about to learn what the wave looks like when the whole ocean gathers behind it. The scarlet and gold comes down off its shelf. The powder box with your name chalked on the lid comes down after it. You are going to Windsor. The move begins before dawn on a Thursday, and when I say a royal household moves, I need you to understand what that means in this reign. This is not packing. This is mobilization. For 2 days the corridors of Sandringham fill with wicker hampers the size of coffins, numbered, listed, strapped and stacked. The linen room empties shelf by shelf into canvas. The plate goes out of the pantry book and into travelling chests with iron corners, and every chest is signed for twice. Once by the man who packs it, once by the man who watches him pack it. Nothing in this world travels alone. Everything travels with a witness. You spend one entire afternoon on your knees in the plate room wrapping sauce boats in green baize, while Mr. Vane stands over you with the book and calls each piece as it vanishes, like a priest reading names. Then the special train south through the dark, the advance party sitting up all night in a third-class carriage, with the state liveries swaying overhead in their canvas bags like hanged men. Alf sleeps on your shoulder. You do not sleep at all. Somewhere past Cambridge you stop trying and simply watch England slide by in the dark. Beatfields first, your own black country, then Fen, then the long dirty glow of London on the clouds, and then, in the grey of the next morning, rising out of river mist above a bend of the Thames, the thing itself, Windsor. You've seen it on biscuit tins. Everyone in England has seen it on biscuit tins. Nothing on a biscuit tin prepares you for the mass of it. The way it does not sit on its hill so much as grow out of it. Grey and endless, a castle the size of a market town wearing a flag. Sandringham, you understand in one look, is a house. A big house, a rich house, but a house. A place a family built because they liked the shooting. This has been the fortress of English kings for more than 800 years. The conqueror himself chose the ground. Everything since has simply refused to stop being built. 1,000 rooms, they tell you. And after 2 days of carrying you believe the figure with your legs before your head has finished arguing. And here is the first strange thing, a small thing, and it troubles you more than the battlements do. The clocks tell the truth. Every clock at Windsor keeps God's own time. Of course it does. Sandringham time is the private joke of a private house, and this is not a private house. This is the monarchy in stone. But you have lived half an hour into the future since October, and now the future has been confiscated, and all that first day you're early for everything, standing in cold doorways with laden trays, 30 minutes ahead of a world that has abruptly stopped lying. You had not understood until the lie was taken from you, how completely you had come to live inside the king's clocks. Alf puts it his own way, scowling up at a stable clock that refuses to be wrong. Feels in decent, honest time, like being paid in real money. The castle has its own people, and the castle's people have their own opinion of you. To the resident staff of Windsor, you and Alf are shooting lodge men, country service, half tame. Nobody says this. Everybody says this. The man who says it most clearly without saying a word of it is Mr. Brand, the senior table decker, who has dressed the great tables of this castle for 40 years, who laid plate for the old queen through both her jubilees, and who examines the pair of you on your first morning the way a drill sergeant examines militia. He is a broad, slow, deliberate man near 70, with a table-decker's flat-footed glide and heavy hands that come to rest on things the way snow comes to rest, without sound and exactly where they mean to. "Sandringham men," he says at last. "You can carry, I'm told. Good. Anyone can carry." He turns a gilt candlestick half an inch, and somehow the whole sideboard comes into focus around it like an eye-opening. A castle wants placing. You learn what he means on the day the grand service comes up. It comes up from vaults under the castle, through doors that want 2 men and 2 keys, chest after iron-cornered chest. And when the baize comes off in the plate room, the room itself changes colour. Silver gilt, silver clothed in gold, made for George IV, the present king's great-uncle, a man who spent on his table what other kings spent on wars, tureens you could bathe a child in, wine coolers the size of drums, candelabra like young trees, dish upon dish upon dish, gold on gold on gold, and when the full service is mustered, it runs to some 4,000 pieces, and every single piece will pass through somebody's gloved hands twice in and out of the book. The gold is colder than silver, or you imagine it is. Your own face looks up at you, stretched and stained amber, from the boss of every dish you wrap. Bran presides over the counting like a bishop at an ordination, and when you have entered your 40th row of gilt spoons, he says, not unkindly, "The castle does not trust men, Mr. Croft. Men are honest, and men are careful, and men drop dead. The castle counts. Remember that too. Remember the gloves, and the book, and the counting. 2 o'clock in the morning is coming, and then there is the room." They walk you into St. George's Hall on your second day, to learn the ground the way a soldier learns his, and you stop walking. And Alf, who was born within the sound of bow bells and has been unimpressed by everything since, stops beside you and says, quietly, "Blimey," which for Alf is a psalm. The hall is 180 feet long. You know, because you pace it heel to toe when no one is watching, the way you measured barns as a boy. The table that's being built down the middle of it, oak leaf by oak leaf, will run very nearly the length of a cricket pitch and half again, and overhead the whole ceiling is armour. The painted shields of the Knights of the Garter, rank after rank of them, 6 centuries deep, back to the founding of the order in 1348. Here and there among the bright coats hangs a blank one, plain white, wiped clean, and Bran tells you why with a certain relish. A knight who betrayed the order had his arm struck out, painted over, erased above the dinner table forever. You try not to find the blank shields ominous, considering the guest who is coming. You do not entirely succeed. For a week you drill. The distances are the danger here. At Sandringham nothing lives more than 40 feet from a sideboard, but in this hall a hot dish can be 60 yards from home, and a footman's glide that reads as stately across a dining room reads as a funeral across 60 yards. So the glide must lengthen without ever once looking like hurry. You practice with weighted trays. You learn the stations, the relays, the doors. You watch Mr. Vane and Mr. Bran circle one another with the elaborate courtesy of 2 old master craftsmen who each privately believe the other's methods are ruining the trade, and you watch them, over that week, arrive wordlessly at respect. Vane because Bran's tables are true to a hair's width, Brand because Vane's men do not need telling twice. Footmen come down from London to make up the numbers, powdered strangers with palace manners, and the pantries fill with borrowed men and lists. And under all of it, all week, runs the wire of the news, because the visit very nearly did not happen, and everyone down to the youngest page knows it. The Emperor is the King's own nephew, his dead sister's son, grandson of the old Queen, who died, they will always tell you in this trade, in his arms, half English by blood and schooling, holder of British uniforms which he collects and wears with a convert's zeal. And the 2 empires have spent these last years eyeing one another's shipyards the way 2 men at a card table eye one another's sleeves. That is as much politics as this story needs, and as much as ever crossed a Bay's door. What crossed the Bay's door was this. Through late October the telegrams flew, and the word below stairs, and the word in the newspapers too, so I'm telling you nothing England didn't know, was that the Emperor had written pleading illness, nerves, doctors, anything, trying to slip the engagement, and that the King, who can read his nephew the way Mr. Vane reads a table, replied in the tone that uncles use, and that for the better part of a week nobody in 2 capitals knew whether the greatest dinner of the year would happen at all. It happened. He is coming. And you learn from the shape of that week something no history book will put so plainly. Even emperors dread dinner parties. 2 nights before the arrival, Mr. Vane assembles his own men in a borrowed pantry, takes out the black notebook, and gives the quietest briefing you have ever heard from him. The emperor's left arm, he says, has been damaged from his birth. It is shorter than the right, and it does not serve him. You have not noticed this. You'll continue not to notice it. His own gentleman attends him at table and carries his Imperial Majesty's own cutlery. The pieces are made to work in one hand. The rubber band goes back around the book with a small crack. Nothing will be placed at his left that wants 2 hands. Nothing will be offered from the left that can come from the right. And no man of mine will glance, pause, or assist unasked, because the whole art of that gentleman's life has been to need nothing. We will be furniture. Croft. Yes, Mr. Vane. What do you watch? The plate, Mr. Vane, not the man. Not the man, says Vane, and at this table, not the arm. The 11th of November falls on a Monday. All morning the castle hums like a struck bell. By noon the town below the walls is packed solid, flags in every window, and in the early afternoon the salutes begin, rolling flat and enormous up from the long walk, rattling the little panes in the corridor where you stand, for you are allowed, for exactly as long as it takes a procession to pass, to be one more pair of eyes at an upper window. You see the escort first, a river of helmets, then the carriages coming up the hill from the station through the roar of the town, and in the first of them 2 men side by side. The king, huge and easy, filling his greatcoat the way a keel fills a hull, lifting his hand to his own people with the unhurried certainty of the sun. And beside him a narrower man sitting very straight, sitting the way a man sits when he is being painted. The moustaches turned up at the ends like the horns of a bull, the eyes moving fast over the crowds. The Empress and the Queen ride opposite. The cheering is warm. Warmer, the knowing ones say afterwards, than anybody in Berlin had promised him. And those who stood nearer swear the Emperor was surprised by it, and moved by it, like a man who had braced for cold water and stepped into a bath. Then the gates take the procession, and the castle swallows it whole, and somewhere below you a door opens and shuts on a burst of band music, and Mr. Vane appears at the end of the corridor with his watch already in his hand. "Gentlemen," he says, "dress." Heavy as a saddle, Mr. Vane told you months ago of the state livery, and you discover now that he was being kind. The scarlet coat is stiff with gold lace to the weight of armour. The gold does not decorate the cloth, it occupies it, seams and cuffs and skirts, and when the coat settles onto your shoulders, your knees make a small private report on the situation. Knee breeches, buckled shoes, gloves, and then the powder. You watch Alf go first, the soap dragged through his hair, the comb, and then the powder dusted on cloud after cloud, until a Londoner of 20 has become a white-headed ghost of 70. And then it is your turn, eyes shut, breath held, the smell of it like a chalk pit in summer. And when you open your eyes, the mirror holds a stranger from your grandfather's century, white-headed, gold-laced, standing in your body. The chalked name on the powder box is half worn away already. Alf looks at you, and you look at Alf, and neither of you laughs, which is how you know that both of you want to, and both of you are afraid to start. "Well," says Alf at last, settling his cuffs. Beatfield Croft, if your old man could see you. He'd ask what they were paying me, and when you told him, he'd sit down. Now come and stand where I have been leading you all this while. Your station is the third sideboard on the window side of St. George's Hall, and from it, at 8 o'clock on the evening of the 11th of November, 1907, you can see the whole gold length of the biggest dinner this house has given in a generation. The table runs away from you down the hall until perspective takes it. White damask and candle flame and flowers, laid. You helped lay it. You know the figure in your hands as well as your head. For more covers than you have ever seen in one room in your life. The grand service climbs the great buffet at the end of the hall in blazing tiers. Gold fountain upon gold fountain, a cliff of light. Hundreds of candles. The shields of 6 centuries hang overhead, going up into the dark, the blank ones quietly among them. And along the walls, spaced like sentries, the men in scarlet and powder, each at his station, each with his section of the table, each doing exactly what you are doing, which is standing perfectly still inside a heartbeat that will not sit down. The procession comes into music from the gallery, and it is the strangest thing. After a week of drills and telegrams and salutes, what it most resembles is Sandringham. The same unhurried pace that everything arranges itself around. The king enters with the Empress of Germany on his arm. The emperor follows with the queen, and behind them the hall fills with everything Europe has. Garter ribbons and diamonds, uniforms of 3 armies, bare shoulders and white ties, ambassadors, field marshals, the whole apparatus. And it all pours slowly down both sides of the table to its places and stands, glittering while the anthems play. The emperor passes within 6 feet of your sideboard. He is 48 years old, and he looks both older and younger than that. Older in the skin, younger in the eyes, which never stop moving, which have inspected you, the candles, the buffet, the ceiling, and the king's back in the time it takes him to walk 5 steps. Up close the famous moustaches are grey at the roots and lacquered to their points. He wears a British uniform, his uncle's cloth, worn the way converts wear everything, more correctly than the born. And the left hand rests where it rests in every photograph you have ever seen of him, low and composed on the hilt of his sword, gloved, still, carried like something precious that must not be woken. And having been told for a week not to see it, you see nothing else for 3 entire seconds. Then your training closes over you like water. The plate, not the man, not the arm. The company sits. The hall makes the sound of 400 chairs and 1 silence, and the service begins. Turtle soup first, because on nights of state it is nearly always turtle soup, green gold and glistening, the most expensive liquid in England. And the moment the plates go down, the machine you've drilled inside all week starts to turn, and you stop being a young man with a heartbeat and become what you were built to be all year. A moving part. The relays run. The doors swing on their leathered hinges without a sound. 60 yards of hall, hot dishes travelling in silver convoys, and everything at the glide. Everything at the same glide, so that from the table the whole apparatus of 80 men resolves into a single quiet fact. The food arrives. Fish after the soup, then the entrees, and among them, because appetite is the one constant in this reign, crisis or no crisis, the little birds again, quails with their hearts of foie gras, going down the long mile of white shoulders 2 by 2. You serve your section, and your section includes 4 covers up from the salt, a Prussian general with a head like a shell and a monocle screwed in so firmly it appears structural. And it is with this general, during the fish, that you watch the rule of the plate operate, as I promised you at the very beginning of this story you would, like a guillotine, because the king eats tonight the way the king eats every night. State does not slow that fork. Down at the head of the table, flanked by an empire wearing the collar of every order that matters in Europe, His Majesty addresses the courses in exactly the order, and at exactly the pace he addresses them at Sandringham on a wet Tuesday. Quickly, seriously, completely, while the Emperor beside him talks, brilliantly, ceaselessly, leaning in, building pictures in the air with his one good hand, and the king listens with a host's patience, and nods where nodding is wanted, and eats. The Emperor eats like a soldier, fast and without pleasure, food as fuel between sentences. The king eats like the king, and so even here, in the deepest water in European politics, the plates keep the king's time, and the king finishes his fish while your general's is half eaten. The knife and fork come together at the head of the table. The signal runs down the hall the way wind runs over barley, a visible thing, watch after watch of scarlet men leaning in, and the plates lift, section by section, like a flock of birds taking off a field. There is a way of taking a plate out from under a man's loaded fork so smoothly that his own hand cannot decide whom to blame. Mr. Vane taught it to you in a cold pantry in Norfolk, and you perform it now upon the Prussian army. The monocle comes around. The head like a shell inclines toward outrage. A general of infantry, mid-mouthful, robbed by furniture, and you're already 2 paces gone, face closed, plate low, when you see him glance up the table to find the author of the theft, and find him. The King of England, host of the evening, serenely awaiting his entree. Every English plate in the hall already gone. The Emperor himself setting down his fork. The monocle stands down. There is nothing else it can do. The king's plate commands every plate in the room. Tonight the room contains an empire and a half, and it commands those too. The quails come to the Emperor's cover in their turn, and it happens to be your dish that comes to his shoulder. A step, a stillness, the silver lowered to precisely the height you were drilled to lower it, and without being told twice you have turned the dish a quarter as you set it forward, so that everything upon it offers itself to the right hand. No pause, no glance. No. The imperial fork takes its bird. Beside and behind, the Emperor's own gentleman, a tall, grey, watchful officer whose whole career is this table and others like it, lets his eyes rest on you for the length of half a breath, which in the language of your trade is a paragraph. You retire at the glide, and across 60 feet of candlelight from the head sideboard, Mr. Vane gives you nothing at all. No nod, no flicker, nothing, which from Mr. Vane, as the whole pantry will agree at 2 a.m, is mentioned in dispatches. Course follows course down the great card of that night, the full state length of it, a dozen services and more. The wax burns down an inch. The hall grows warm as a hayloft in the candle heat, and under the powder your scalp itches with the patience you have been a year learning. And at the end of it the king rises, and the hall rises with him, gold and diamonds and 3 armies coming to their feet in one long rustle like surf. He speaks. You're too far down the hall to catch every word, and the words will be in every newspaper in Europe by morning anyway, so I can tell you truly what the papers said. That he spoke of welcome and of kinship, of the ties of family and the friendship of 2 peoples, and that the words were warm. And the Emperor rises to answer, and his English is flawless, his mother's English, learned in her lap, the old Queen's first grandchild speaking to her son across a table the length of a tilt yard. And his voice carries where his uncle's rumbles, and he speaks of peace and of his grandmother, and for a moment the hall under its 600 years of shields is entirely still. The toasts are drunk standing, 100 points of candle fire in the lifted crystal, the anthems again, and then the chairs, and the coffee, and the cigars, the 7th of the King's Day going up in blue ribbons toward the blank shields, and the ladies withdraw, and the great machine begins, joint by joint, to let go. You have been on your feet, by the honest clocks of Windsor, since 2 in the afternoon. It is now near midnight. The hall empties the way halls empty, all at once and then not quite. The candles are put out section by section, the gold of the buffet going dark, tier by tier, top to bottom, like a city turning in for the night, and it is over, except that nothing in this trade is over when the guests go. A banquet ends twice, once upstairs for them, and once much later, downstairs for you. The second ending is called the counting, and the counting is where the night is waiting. Picture the plate room at 1 in the morning, every lamp lit, the long deal tables padded with baize, and the grand service coming home piece by piece from the hall, carried, washed on the far side by hands that are not yours, dried, carried again, and laid out in ranks for the book. Mr. Brand sits at the head of the first table with the ledger open and his spectacles down his nose, and calls the pieces, and the pieces answer by arriving. Tureens, coolers, the candelabra like felled trees now, dish cores and dish covers and the little lion-footed salts, rank upon rank of gold under the gas, while powdered men with aching backs move along the rows in gloves. This is the tide going out. 4,000 pieces went up, 4,000 pieces come down. The castle counts. At 2:15 the count comes up one short. One of the small gilt salts, a thing the size of an egg cup, lion feet, a swab of blue glass in its heart, worth more than your year. Brand runs the page again. Vane runs the row with his own hands, not trusting eyes. Short. The room does not erupt. Nothing in this trade erupts. The room goes quiet in a particular way you have never heard before, a silence with edges, and you feel the cold of it arrive in your stomach, because you know, everyone in the room knows, what a missing piece of the grand service means on this night of all nights. Searches, questions, a theft, or the suspicion of a theft, with 2 households under one roof, and you cannot search an emperor's footmen. The mere asking would be a small international incident on a night the newspapers have already called historic. Suspicion will not go upstairs. Suspicion never goes upstairs. It'll settle down here, in the plate room, on the gloves, on the borrowed men, on the shooting lodge men, and it will stay for years. Brand takes off his spectacles. Vane takes out the black notebook and does not open it, which is somehow worse. And Alf, who's been leaning against the second table with his eyes half shut, straightens up and starts to think like the thing that is lost. You watch him do it. Later you will tell it in the servants' hall at Sandringham for the rest of your service, and it never gets smaller in the telling because it never needs to. He stands where the salt stood in the hall in his mind. He clears them again, in his mind, hand over hand at the speed of the guillotine rule, and then he says, to nobody, crumb cloth, and is gone through the door with a lamp. The slip cloths and crumb cloths from the hall have gone down in wicker hampers to wait for the laundry. There are 11 hampers. He opens them in order of which sections cleared fastest. because a salt goes missing where hands were quickest, and in the fourth hamper, rolled inside a slipcloth like an egg in a nest, dulled with a smear of sauce mousseline, is the king's gilt salt. He carries it back through the plate-room door on his open palm. At the glide, deadpan, a white-headed ghost delivering the crown jewels, and the room breathes out in one long movement, and Mr. Brand closes his eyes for a moment before he enters it in the book. "Castles count, Mr. Dowd," he says, "but it takes a man to find." Mr. Vane says nothing at all until the book is ruled off and the chests are locked. Then, as the room empties, he stops beside Alf, and you are near enough to hear what the driest man in England spends on him. "My count is never wrong, Mr. Dowd. Tonight it very nearly was. Thank you." "Thank you" from Mr. Vane lands like a medal. Alf stands there with his mouth open, outgunned for the first time in his London life. And between the pantry in October and the plate room in November, the ledger between those two, the quail that was never stolen and the salt that was never lost, has quietly balanced itself, the way debts are paid in service. Never spoken of, always paid. One more thing rides home from that night, and you know what it is, because I told you at the very start of this story that one particular card was the reason we are here. In the clearing of the hall, among the dead flowers and the dropped name cards and the spilt wax, the menus of the evening go to the waste as menus always do, and one of them, creased at a corner, wine-ringed at the foot, goes instead inside your waistcoat flat against your heart, and stays there through the counting and the salt and everything else, dated the 11th of November 1907, headed with the cipher. The whole state length of that dinner in fine French copperplate from the turtle soup down. When you're back in Norfolk, it will go into the box under your Sunday shirt, on top of the year's stack, the one card the whole box was waiting for. A day of a king's appetite written out in French, from the night two empires dined at one table and pretended not to measure each other. The eyes I have lent you tonight are borrowed. I told you that honestly. The card is not. Cards like it outlived every person in that hall. They lie now in archives and collectors' drawers, real, dated, touchable, and everything I have read you from them is written on their faces. It is past 3 when you get to the beer. The visiting servants mess with the kings in a long stone-vaulted room, 2 households at one scrub table, and the talk is the talk of the trade in 2 languages, feet, distances, the heat of the hall, the near-run thing with the relays at the game course. Professional talk, because below stairs all banquets are audited by the men who carried them. Across from you sits one of the Emperor's own footmen, a big quiet Brandenburger with careful English and forearms like Alf's, card-playing blacksmith, and you compare, in the universal language of raised eyebrows and held-up fingers, the weight of your respective trays. And then, late, when the benches have thinned, he leans across the scrubbed oak with the friendliness of the 4th beer, and lowers his voice and asks it. "Tell me a thing. In Berlin they say the English have a name for your king, because of—" and he pats his own stomach twice softly and grins, man to man, furniture to furniture. "It is true? What is the name?" And there it is. Mr. Vane's whole sermon arrived in person, wearing a friendly face at 3 in the morning after the longest day of your working life, when your feet are dead and your head is loose and the beer is warm in you, the truth from the furniture, the entire price of you. You look at him with your face closed, the way you've looked at the middle distance for a year. "I'm sure I never heard it," you say. The Brandenburger studies you for a moment. Something moves behind his eyes. Recognition, professional and exact, and he nods slowly and lifts his beer an inch off the table in your direction. "No," he says, "neither have I." And you drink to that, the two of you, to the thing neither of you has ever heard, and you do not ask him what Berlin calls his emperor, and he does not tell you, and somewhere in the dark overhead, two of the most talked about men on earth sleep unprotected from everything except their servants, who protect them absolutely, and always will, and never once get thanked for the particular thing they are protecting them from. The visit runs a week. There are reviews and luncheons. There is a day when the shooting goes out into the great park, and the luncheon goes out after it. Pony carts on frozen ground, soup in padded cans, the whole Sandringham liturgy performed on Berkshire earth. And there is one grey morning. You hear it below stairs, the way you hear everything, when the two of them, uncle and nephew, go down alone to the mausoleum at Frogmore, where the old Queen lies with her Albert, and stand there a while, and come back not talking. Even the servants' hall has no joke for that one. She was his grandmother, and she died in his arms, and she was the king's mother, and between those two facts the two empires are, for one grey morning, simply a family that has lost its head. On the 18th, the emperor leaves the castle, that is. England he cannot bring himself to leave, and he stays on for weeks by the sea as a private gentleman, wallowing in being liked. But that is his story, not ours. The flags come down in the town. The grand service goes back below through the two key doors, counted twice. The state livery goes back into its canvas bag, and the powder washes out of your hair in 3 basins of grey water, and the special train takes the household north again through the fens in the dark. And at King's Lynn, on the platform, the first thing you see is the station clock, and the first thing you do is put your watch half an hour wrong to meet the house that is waiting for you. The clocks lie to you again, half an hour into the future, where the king lives. You are surprised, you will remember being surprised, how much the lie feels like home. December settles over Norfolk like a lid. The rhythm takes you back without comment. The pheasant on the cold sideboard, square to the cloth. The smoke of the first cigar down the corridor like a herald. The 5 fixed stars of your sky, breakfast to oysters, each in its place. It is as if the Hall of Shields happened to some other man, except that your glide is longer now, and your hands are quieter, and Mr. Vane has begun, without one word of ceremony, giving you the wine-table postings that belong by custom to men senior to you. In the hard weather after Christmas comes the one job you will love all your life without being able to say why. The ice harvest, when the lake freezes deep, and the estate men cut it in blocks, and you stand extra duty at the sledges while the icehouse swallows flow after green-white flow of Norfolk Lake, packed in straw, dark and dripping, a whole winter buried alive to be spent by the spoonful, and all next summer every ice at the king's table will taste faintly, to you and to no one else in the room, of that one blue ringing morning. And at Christmas, at Sandringham, where the household presents are given out with the family standing by, because this family does that, it is one of the things the servants' halls of other houses do not believe until they see it. The king works down the line of his own people with an equerry murmuring at his shoulder, and reaches you, and does not need the murmur. "Croft," he says, "Norfolk man in Norfolk." 2 months he has kept that joke, and he produces it like a conjurer, with the small blue eyes already moving to see it land, and the sovereign goes into your palm warm from his hand, £1 gold a month of your father's beat, and it strikes you only afterwards, lying in the attic dark with your fist still closed around it, what the most royal thing about it was. A man tipping in currency stamped with his own face. You send it home whole, inside a letter it takes you 4 evenings to write, and your mother, Alf reads you her answer twice because you keep stopping. Your mother has put the letter behind the tea caddy where the neighbours will see it, and your father has said only that the king evidently knows a Norfolk man when he sees one, which from your father is a speech. January and February are the trade's deep winter, and I will let them pass the way they passed, which is quietly. The court moves and returns. House parties come and go. The dining room is stripped to its bones and built back better. Cloths mended, plate reburnished, the year's wear made good. And the 5 meals turn overhead like constellations, and the king's waist is measured again for the spring clothes, and the figure that comes back down the backstairs telegraph is the same figure, and nobody says anything, because below stairs it is simply the weather, and you do not editorialise about weather. 12 cigars, 20 cigarettes, 5 meals. The sun rises 5 times a day, even in February. Then, on a morning at the end of February, Mr. Vane takes out the notebook in the pantry and holds it unopened, which by now you know is how he delivers the things that matter. His Majesty goes abroad in March, he says. Biarritz, small party, small table, no state. Dining room service travels light, 2 footmen. The thumb moves once along the rubber band. Dowd, Croft. Alf's face does something complicated and joyful. Yours, you're told later, simply stopped. Biarritz. Understand what this is, because it is the other half of the man you've served all year, and you cannot understand the appetite until you've seen it in the sun. Every March, while the English weather is still trying to kill the English, the king goes south to a white hotel on the edge of the Atlantic at the bottom corner of France, the Hôtel du Palais, built long ago as a palace for an empress and converted conveniently into a palace for anyone. And there for 6 weeks he becomes as close to a private gentleman as it is possible for the most photographed man in Europe to be. He travels under the name of the Duke of Lancaster. It is a disguise the way a paper crown is a disguise. It deceives nobody and is meant to deceive nobody. It is a king's way of asking Europe to lower its voice, and Europe, charmed, obliges. You go ahead with the heavy baggage, boat train and channel steamer and the length of France flat out behind a French engine, and you arrive into a light that no Norfolk man has any word for. The Atlantic stands up against the rocks below the hotel and turns white all day. The air is salt and tamarisk and mimosa. The king arrives brown-hatted and beaming, sheds London the way other men shed a coat, and settles into a suite on the first floor with the sea in every window. And Caesar, who has made the journey in the charge of a footman, outranking the footman, takes up his duties at once, patrolling the terraces and declaring war on the gulls of the Bay of Biscay, who treat him, to his visible fury, as weather. And the table travels. That is the point of it. That is why you're in this story of sun and tamarisk at all. The menus are still written in French, only now the kitchen agrees with them. The courses still come in their order, the little birds still arrive in their season, the plate still keeps the king's time, at a table of 8 on a hotel floor as surely as at a table of 100 under the shields. Luncheon is the famous one here, the picnics. The motors are loaded with hampers, and the king goes out in a tweed cape and a soft hat into the hills towards Spain, and at some turn of road with a view, and he is a connoisseur of turns of road. He collects them the way he collects uniforms. The cloth is spread on the grass verge, and the cold quail and the pies and the wine come out of the hampers, and His Majesty dines by the roadside in the Pyrenean wind with the appetite of a ploughboy, while French cyclists wobble past, trying not to stare, and Caesar supervises the horizon. 5 meals a day, the sun simply rises in French. It is on one of those afternoons, waiting at the cloth's edge on a headland above the bay, while the party walks off its luncheon, that you get your one great look at the size of the world you have been carrying dishes across. From the point by the lighthouse, the whole coast lays itself out under you like a map. The bay in 2 blues, the white town along its rim, the Pyrenees standing in haze down the Spanish side, and the Atlantic going out flat and shining to the very rind of the earth, with the smoke of steamers strung along it like beads on a wire, liners and colliers and cargo boats, the traffic of 3 empires crawling along the sea roads to Cape and Plate and Indies. You stand there in your dark travelling livery with a folded cloth over your arm, a beat farmer's son at the edge of France, and you feel the thing you felt at Windsor under the shields, only larger because this time it has the sea in it. The world is enormous, and it is all connected, and the tables you serve are the small warm rooms where the men who steer it eat their quail. You are barely a cog in the smallest wheel of it, but you are here. You are in it. Your father has never seen the sea, and you're watching 2 empires' worth of it glitter on wages with sand in your buckled shoes. Croft, Ulf at your shoulder, following your eyes out to the steamer smoke. He is quiet for a moment, which for Alf is a pilgrimage. Then, long way from the plate room, long way from anywhere. Don't tell them at home the sea's this big, they'll call you a liar. And it is here, at Biarritz, in the middle of this rest cure of quail and sunshine, that history walks up the hotel steps in a frock coat, because in the first week of April the newspapers turn heavy, and the talk among the suite turns heavier. The Prime Minister, far away in London, is dying and has resigned, and a government must change hands, and the King is here, and the King does not go home. And so there happens a thing that had never happened before and has never happened since. England changes Prime Ministers in an hotel. On the 8th of April, 1908, a heavy-faced Yorkshire-born lawyer named Herbert Asquith, who has sat up all night on the train and crossed on the morning boat, arrives at the Hôtel de Palais in a plain travelling coat, goes up to the King's rooms between breakfast and luncheon, kneels and kisses hands as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom in a first-floor sitting room with the Atlantic banging away below the windows. The English papers growl about it for a week. A Prime Minister, they say, ought to be made in London, not in a French hotel, and the King attends to the growling precisely as he attends to his doctors. You see almost none of it, and I will not pretend you do. What you see is what a footman sees, a stranger's hat and coat in the corridor, unmistakably London in all that southern light, a tray of coffee going in, and then, afterwards, a big grave man coming out of the King's rooms and pausing a moment at the head of the stairs, holding the banister, gathering himself, with the look of a man who has just been handed a tray far heavier than it appears. It is a look you know professionally. The pheasant, you could have told him, is always heavier than it looks. You carry the first one badly and everyone after it better. He goes down the stairs and out into history, and luncheon is at 1:30, cold salmon and a galantine, and the King eats every course. The party comes home to England at the very end of April, brown and rested, into a country wearing new leaves, and within a fortnight Mr. Vane holds his unopened notebook in the pantry again. Hollis is leaving us for a club in St. James's, he says, More money and no glory. It is his life, which leaves me short a second footman. The thumb once along the rubber band. Croft, you'll take it from Monday. £34. And then, before the room can react, Dowd, stop looking as though you expected justice. Your turn is coming, and when it comes you will be ready, which is a thing I could not always have said, which is as near as Mr. Vane has ever come, in the memory of the pantry, to paying 2 compliments in one breath. Second footman, your mother will carry the letter to church, and the first practical consequence arrives within the month, when the new third footman comes, a chalk country boy from Wiltshire, 17, with wrists not yet grown into his cuffs, who on his first morning carries a cold pheasant across 40 feet of carpet as if it were a live shell, and sets it down on the sideboard crooked, and looks at the crookedness in white terror, and you reach past him and square the dish to the cloth, the way a year of mornings has taught your hands to do without you. It gets easier, you tell him, and you hear it as you say it. Whose corridor you first heard that tone in, and how far half an inch of gold braid has carried you. Summer takes the court to London, and I will give you London in one breath, because it is the same trade in taller rooms, levees, dinners, the season, the same French cards in the same silver stands, the same rule of the plate under higher ceilings. And because our story belongs to Norfolk and the year is turning home, what matters to the arithmetic of this story is August, because in August the king goes to Marienbad, and Marienbad is the punchline that the whole magnificent joke of the 5 meals has been building toward all year. Marienbad is a spa in Bohemia, where the waters are said to be sovereign against, among other things, stoutness. Every August His Majesty travels there, semi-incognito again, the paper crown again, and submits himself to the cure, and the cure is this: a tumbler of iron tasting water at 6:30 in the morning, a measured walk among pines, a diet drawn up by professors and amended personally after luncheon, and the society entirely by coincidence of half the chancelleries of Europe, who discover every August that their health, too, requires precisely these pines. You do not go. The Marienbad party travels lighter than Biarritz. You have the story the way the servants' hall always has it, from the valet's postcards, read aloud by Alf over cocoa with editorial gestures. His Majesty walks. His Majesty drinks the waters punctually. His Majesty loses by the 3rd week a quantity of weight the doctors describe as encouraging, and His Majesty returns to England in September, brown, benevolent, superbly rested, and by the unanimous verdict of the pantry scales of gossip precisely as magnificent as he left. The waters of Marienbad have never yet cured anyone of being Edward VII. The doctors know it. He knows it. The tumblers are raised at 6:30 all the same, and everyone bows to everyone. It is one of the most civilized lies in Europe, and both parties keep it as faithfully as the clocks keep Sandringham time. And at the first tea after his homecoming, in the Queen's warm, crowded room with the photographs, you watch Her Majesty look her husband over once, head tilted, bird-like, deaf to the room and missing nothing. The brown of him, the benevolence of him, the precise, unchanged magnificence of him back from the cure. And she says nothing at all, and reaches over and moves the ashtray nearer. 40 years of marriage in one gesture. Patience, you understand finally, watching from the sideboard, is also a cure that cures nothing. It is simply the only one he will take daily, and she has never once missed a dose. And then it is October again, and the guns come back to Norfolk, and one grey early morning you are standing at the cold sideboard in the breakfast room with a roast pheasant on old silver in your hands, squaring it to the edge of the cloth, when the arithmetic of the calendar arrives all at once, quietly, the way real anniversaries do. A year since a beet farmer's son first carried this dish across this carpet with his heart in his mouth. The pheasant is still heavier than it looks. That has not changed and never will. It is the first true thing this trade taught you. What has changed is the carrying. Your arms have learned the weight so well that the weight has disappeared into them, the way the half-hour lie disappeared into your watch, the way the standing disappeared into your legs somewhere around February. 10 hours on your feet is no longer a thing you survive. It is a thing you are. That night, after the oysters, after the cocoa, you sit on your bed under the slates and take the box out from under the Sunday shirt and go through the year card by card. It is all there. A king's appetite day by day, in fine French copper plate, the consommes and the turbots, the snipe stuffed with foie gras, the grouse pyramids of 2 Octobers, the travelling luncheons, the little birds. Somewhere in the middle of the stack, stiff as a playing card still, the 11th of November, with its wine ring like a small rose stain at the foot. 52 Sundays' worth of dinners no one at home will ever believe. You square the stack, the way you square everything now, and put it away, and blow out the candle, and lie listening to Alf breathe and the rain come off the North Sea onto the slates, and you find you can hold the whole year in your 2 hands like the box, the guillotine rule and the sovereign warm from his hand, the 48 inches and the kept name of a 3rd footman, Tum-Tum, which you have never heard, and the man who knows the old coachman's rheumatism. Both facts at once. You said you would hold them all night. You have held them all year. That is the whole truth of this king from 3 feet behind his chair, and it is more truth than the caricatures have, and more than some of the biographies will manage either. The hungriest man in Europe, and the kindest master a servants' hall ever audited, and no daylight at all between the two because they were never two. A man who could not stop wanting food, company, speed, smoke, the whole loaded sideboard of the world, and who noticed, wanting it, every small person who carried it to him. The machine turns on. Breakfast, luncheon, tea, dinner, supper. The clocks lie their faithful half-hour. The doctors count the cigars and are ignored with perfect courtesy. On the quiet evenings the king plays bridge, and the drawing-room glows like the inside of a jewel box. And toward midnight the chafing dish comes up the corridor with its small blue flame, and the smell of hot oyster shells and butter arrives absurdly in the middle of Norfolk, and His Majesty, cards in hand, is happy. You have stood in the presence of many kinds of importance this year, and you know happiness when you're 3 feet behind its chair. You do not yet know. No one in that warm room knows, least of all the man with the cards, that the machine has less than 2 springs left to run, that he will go to Biarritz once more, and once more after that, and come home from the last one tired in a way that Marienbad has no water for, and that on a night in May, 1910, in London, the 5th meal will go unordered, and the house will fall silent from the attics down, and that a few days later a small rough-haired terrier will walk through London behind a gun carriage, ahead of 9 kings, ahead of the nephew, who comes back for it, and rides in the procession behind a dog, with the whole of England weeping on both sides of the road, I am Caesar. I belong to the king. None of that has happened. None of it can be guessed. Tonight the king is at cards, and the oysters are coming, and the only clocks that matter in the world are half an hour fast. and you stand at your post by the door with the tray, 24 years old, second footman, holding the room in your eyes the way you were taught, sideways, completely, without ever once looking. Let the year end there. It is a good place to stand. Stay a little longer, though. The year is told, but a house like this does not stop all at once at the end of a story, and neither should you. Houses like this stop the way a great wheel stops slowly by evenings, and it is the evenings of that second winter, the quiet ones, the ones with nothing in them, that you will find you remember longest of all. So take a few of them with you on the way down into sleep. Take the servants' hall first, on a night of sleet in late November, with the cocoa jug going round and the fire ticking, when the Wiltshire boy, braver now, his wrists finally catching up with his cuffs, asks across the table whether it is true what the older men say about the Emperor of Germany and the missing gold salt. And you discover in the space of one swallow of cocoa that you have become the man the question comes to, that you are now the archive. So you tell it. The plate room at 1 in the morning, the Count coming up short, the silence with edges, and Alf naturally cannot bear to hear his own legend told at an honest size, and takes over from the 4th sentence, and by the time he's done the hampers have doubled, and the salt was practically in Berlin. And from the doorway, where no one heard him arrive because no one ever hears him arrive, Mr. Vane says, 11 hampers, Mr. Dowd. It was the 4th, and the sauce was mousseline, and is gone again down the passage. And that is how you learn that every story ever told in this hall about Mr. Vane has been heard in its telling by Mr. Vane, and audited, and let stand where it was true. Take the evening at the plate room table, just the two of you burnishing candlesticks, when you ask him, carefully, the way you'd reach past a dog for its bone, what will become of the black notebook some day. He does not look up. The rag keeps moving in small circles. The fire, he says. The day I leave service, the book goes into the grate, and I will stand there while it burns. You must look stricken, because he glances at you once, and something that is almost patience crosses the long grey face. You think the book is the trade, 20 years of His Majesty's likings, and which Archduke cannot abide a sauce, and it burns with me. You think it a waste. The rag stops. The book is not facts, Croft. Facts die with their king. God willing, a long time from now, they will be no use to anyone alive. The book is attention. The book is 30 years of one man looking at a table and writing down what he saw. Attention cannot be inherited. It can only be practiced. The rag starts again. You'll keep your own. You've already begun. I've watched you begin. Different king some day, different likings, same attention. That is how the trade is handed on. Not the book. The looking. The looking. You will carry that word out of this story wherever you imagine Thomas Croft going after it, because it is the whole year in one syllable. The plate, not the man, the count, not the trust. The room held in the eyes, sideways, completely. The looking is the trade. Everything else is carrying. Take the drawing room at 1 in the morning, deep in December, when the bridge has run long and you're at your post by the door with the tray, and the warmth and the lateness conspire, and a yawn comes up in you from your boot heels, and you fight it the way you were trained, jaw locked, face closed, a battle entirely internal and entirely visible, apparently, to one person in the room. Because the Queen, sitting deaf and bright among her photographs at the soft end, catches it. Her eyes come up and find yours in the 1 second of your life you would least have chosen. And you wait, frozen, for whatever it is that happens now. and Queen Alexandra, the most photographed beauty of her age, mother of a king-to-be, presses her lips together and yawns back. Tiny, deliberate, perfectly concealed from everyone in the room except its intended audience, and returns to her album with a face of total innocence. It is the single greatest act of kindness the year has shown you, and there is no one you can ever tell. And both of those things you understand at your post with your ears burning are exactly what makes it royal. Take the oyster night, because Caesar's long arithmetic pays off at last, and you are there for it. A February midnight, the chafing dish up from the corridor with its blue flame, the king at cards, and in the transfer from dish to plate one oyster, one, in a year of hundreds, escapes and describes a small buttery arc and lands on the carpet of the drawing-room of Sandringham House. And before any scarlet sleeve can move, before the equerry has finished drawing breath, a small white shape that has waited its whole patient career for precisely this moment crosses the carpet at the speed of professional conviction, and the oyster is gone, and Caesar is back at the king's boot, sitting, upright, statesmanlike, a dog against whom nothing can be proved. And the king looks down at him for a long moment, over the cards, over the waistcoat, over the whole magnificent 48-inch geography of himself, and produces the deep, unhurried, gravelled laugh of a man delighted by appetite wherever he finds it. "One day, sir," he tells the dog, "you will be as fat as your master." And the whole table laughs because the king has said the unsayable word himself at midnight over oysters to a terrier, and from your post you file it away in the book you have apparently already begun to keep, that the only creature in the empire who may say tum-tum to the king is the king. Take one more. A December evening, the shortest of the year. The company gone through to the drawing-room, and you at the dining-room door with the candles out behind you, when the unhurried tread comes back along the corridor. Forgotten spectacles, an equerry sent, the king ambling in his own wake, and he pauses, looks at you. The cigar describes a small, thoughtful circle. Croft. A year now, is it? More. 14 months, your majesty. A slow nod. The blue eyes go past you into the dark dining room, to the long table sleeping under its covers, and for a moment the King of England looks at his own table the way you have looked at it all year. From outside, sideways, a room he also, in his way, only ever stands beside. And then the eyes come back, and there is something in them that is not quite the joke this time. Sensible arrangement, he says. Norfolk men in Norfolk, and has gone down the corridor after a spectacles trailing smoke, and you stand at your post until the smell of the 12th cigar has faded entirely, which takes a long time and which you do not hurry. And last of all, take the stable clock. There is a night in the hard middle of that second winter, frost so deep the gravel rings, when you walk out into the yard for no reason you could give Mr. Vane, and stand under the stable tower with your breath smoking, and watch the lit clock face hanging up there in the black cold, half an hour into the future, faithful as a moon. Somewhere behind you the great house lies banked and sleeping with its 5 meals done. Somewhere above it the king's watch, and your watch, and every watch on the estate agree on their beautiful lie. And you take out your own watch, your grandfather's, the one thing of his that came to you, and you check it against the tower, and it is right, which is to say wrong, which is to say right. On your last visit home, your father saw the time it kept and told you it was broken. You let him think so. It seemed simpler than explaining that his son now lives half an hour ahead of England by appointment, that there is a country of clocks where the king is never late and no one else is ever early, and that you are a citizen of it now and mean to remain one. It gets easier, you told the Wiltshire boy. It does. And then, quietly, without your permission, it gets dear. These nights, when sleep is slow in coming, and in this trade, with the feet and the hours, it rarely is. But grant Thomas Croft one wakeful night for the sake of the trick. You have a way of bringing it on. You walk the day, not any particular day. The day, the one the whole year was made of, the one you could serve now in your sleep and probably do. The breakfast room at 8, Sandringham time, the pheasant square to the cloth, and the smoke coming down the corridor like a herald. The marquee at the edge of the covert, soup steaming in the frozen air, Caesar on patrol beneath the trestles. The Queen's warm, crowded room at 5, the teacups the second slice, the 12 courses at 8:30, candle flame and French copper plate, the fork that never pauses, the plates lifting like birds, and at midnight, at the very end, the little blue flame coming up the corridor, and the sea arriving absurdly in Norfolk, hot shells and butter, the 5th star settling into its place. 5 meals, 5 rooms, 5 lights going out one after another down the long corridor of the day. You're asleep most nights before the oysters. Let the year truly end now. It has earned it, and so have you. And time, which was always going to win, wins gently, the way it wins in houses like this. The years will do what years do. The machine will stop and another machine will start, quieter, thinner, under a sailor king with a smaller appetite. The scarlet will go on being pressed, and the plate will go on being counted, because service outlives the served. Sandringham time will keep its faithful half-hour live for another whole generation. The clocks of that estate will go on running fast for 26 years after the man who ordered them is gone, until at last, on the very first night of a new reign, in 9036, a new king's first command will be to set them right, and somewhere in the walls of that house, a half-hour of borrowed time will simply close, like water over a stone. The grand service will go on coming up from the vaults, 2 men, 2 keys, counted twice, for coronations and jubilees and state dinners for the guests of queens. Fire will take the roof of St. George's Hall itself one November night, late in the century, and men will build it back, oak rib by oak rib, and hang the shields again, blanks and all. The menu cards will scatter into archives and albums and auction rooms, where collectors will pay gold for a dead king's dinners in French copper plate, and historians will bend over them with gloves on, counting the courses, hardly able to believe them, believing them. But people will still lay tables, still smooth the cloth with the flat of the hand and stand back to check the line of it, still carry the good dish in for someone they love and watch, sideways, to see if it pleases, still stand at sideboards while other people dine, in every hotel and hall and wedding tent on earth, feet aching, faces closed, seeing everything. Still keep the small kindnesses of the great, and keep their names right, and keep their secrets. Some things don't change. The table doesn't change. The hunger doesn't change. For dinner, for company, for one warm-lit room against the dark. And the quiet people who feed it don't change either, whatever century they are standing in, whatever they are standing beside. So let the house settle now, the way it settled every night of that year. The last candles out in the drawing-room, the strong box locked, the shutters barred, the fires banked to their embers, the king asleep at last, 5 meals down, the 12th cigar out, Caesar curled and twitching in his basket. The Queen's patience folded away with her needlework till morning. Mr. Vane's notebook is buttoned into its pocket. The Count is entered. The salt is in its chest. Alf is snoring his London snore. The pheasants hang in the dark larder for tomorrow, and tomorrow there will be the sideboard, and the smoke coming down the corridor like a herald, and the whole warm machine again. But that's tomorrow. Tomorrow can keep. Nothing is wanted from you now. Nothing on earth is wanted from anyone in this house until the lying clocks say 6. And you, in your attic under the slates, with the rain coming soft off the North Sea, are done. Truly done. Your feet have stopped hurting, the way they only stop when you finally lie still. You are warm enough, under the blankets your wages bought, fed enough in the one house in England where that word means what it means, safe enough behind walls that have outlasted every storm that ever came off that sea, warm enough, fed enough, safe enough, and a sovereign in the box, and a year in your hands, and your name kept by a king. That's more than your father dared want. That's more than most men get. That's enough. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Thomas Croft in his attic room above the king's dining room more than 100 years ago, with the menu cards squared in their box and the rain on the slates. Let the great table sink into the dark piece by piece, the gold going out tier by tier like a city turning in. Let the last door close softly on its bays. Let the clocks run on ahead into the morning without you. They know the way. They have always known the way, half an hour ahead where nothing can catch them. Let the noise of the day fall behind, the bells and the wheels and the voices further and further back, until it is only weather. Let your thoughts slow and soften and settle and finally stop like snow coming to rest, without sound exactly where they mean to. The house is quiet, the plate is counted, the doors are locked and the fires are banked, and the whole vast machine stands still at last in the dark, waiting for morning without you. You've earned this rest, every hour of it standing. Take it, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.